Sorry, but I've started seeing a nurse 20 years younger than me, so I want a divorce. I don't want to waste any more time on you since you can barely take care of me anyway. Oh, and by the way, this house is for me and her now, so pack your stuff and leave.
Hearing Tom's outrageous declaration made me feel sick. After everything he's put me through, now he wants a divorce? On top of that, he's been seeing a woman 20 years younger? Unbelievable. By that point, whatever love I had for him was completely gone. Even so, I had tried my best to keep our marriage going. However, all that effort turned out to be for nothing. I can't forgive him for how he's treated my feelings and for how he's belittled me. I've decided to make him regret it by showing him what true misery looks like. My name is Mary Williams, and I'm a 61-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Tom, just the two of us. We don't have any kids, but I thought we were living a pretty happy life. It's not like we were particularly well off financially, but we had enough to get by. Every day felt content enough. Then, one day, Tom fell seriously ill. He was rushed to the hospital and received treatment, but it became clear he would need long-term care. Daily life wouldn't be the same as his body wasn't working like that used to, and there'd be challenges ahead. Therefore, I decided to learn about caregiving to help him. When Tom finally got discharged and came home, getting him into the specially prepared hospital bed was a struggle. Even though that wasn't easy, I knew I had to push through. I motivated myself and promised to give that my all. For a while, the caregiving went smoothly. Though, I was a wreck emotionally. That was because Tom's attitude changed drastically. At first, he seemed guilty about needing care. Although he often smiled and said,
"Thanks for your support."
His demeanor reflected that remorse. Nevertheless, his attitude shifted over time. At the beginning, Tom thanked me every time I did something for him. However, those thank yous gradually disappeared. Then came the complaints. If I cooked something for him, he'd say,
"This isn't how I like it,"
and leave it uneaten, demanding I make something else. It's not like I had extra time on my hands to cater to his every whim. By then, I was already spending most of my day taking care of him, constantly gauging his mood before doing anything. His changing attitude took a huge toll on me emotionally.
"You're my wife, so it's only natural you support me. And yet, you can't even take care of me properly. Your caregiving is sloppy, and you're leaving me dissatisfied. You need to do better. I've worked hard for you all these years, after all."
Tom started scolding me more and more. Every time he said things like that, I pushed myself harder to care for him. Though, no matter how much I tried, all I ever got back was,
"You're not trying hard enough."
no matter what I did, he never acknowledged my efforts. Still, I kept trying, hoping he'd eventually see me. Over time, my body started to break down from the strain. Though, I didn't have the luxury of taking a break or going to the doctor. As my condition worsened, I started making more caregiving mistakes. Every time I messed up, Tom berated me.
"Can't you at least handle caregiving properly? After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Marrying you was a mistake. I never imagined my retirement would turn out like this."
He'd say things like that, with a tone of disgust. Each time, I'd sink deeper into despair, which only led to more mistakes. Then I'd blame myself again, sinking into a depression so deep I couldn't pull myself out of that. This cycle kept repeating over and over. Naturally, the atmosphere in the house became gloomy, which only made Tom even more dissatisfied.
"It's your fault the house feels so depressing. Can you stop dragging me down already? Do you ever think about creating a pleasant environment for us?"
He criticized me like that repeatedly. If I could just change my mindset so easily, I wouldn't be struggling like that in the first place. To begin with, it's his cruel words that have driven me to that point. Still, I tried to brighten up the house and make that feel more cheerful, putting in a lot of effort. Nevertheless, nothing worked. If anything, that only seemed to make Tom more irritable. Soon, he'd look annoyed every time we crossed paths, and I kept wondering,
what am I supposed to do?
The stress of those days seemed to be taking a toll on me. I felt like I was wasting away. Even so, I couldn't stop caregiving. I had to keep going. I told myself that, standing back up every time I felt like giving in.
You're never trying hard enough. The nurse always looks so happy to see me. How about you? You just sigh when you look at me. Why don't you learn something from her?
After every visit to the hospital, Tom would compare me to the nurse. Sure, the nurse is a professional. Compared to that nurse, my caregiving must seem like the difference between night and day. Even so, I couldn't help but think it wasn't fair to be measured against her. Though, I never stood up to him. Part of that was fear of his scolding, but a part of me also still wanted to stay by his side, even after everything. As awful as things had become, Tom was still my husband. As his wife, it felt like my duty to take care of him. With that mindset, I kept doing my best every single day. However, instead of improving, Tom's attitude only got worse. Before I knew it, he was sighing every time he saw my face and complaining about me at every turn.
What is this disgusting meal? How dare you serve me something like this? What if it makes me sick?
Sometimes he'd even flip over the plate of food I'd served him. Every time, I said,
Sorry,
and prepared another meal for him. That was utterly draining. All I could think about was how to keep him happy. That day, Tom had a doctor's appointment. I put him in the car and drove him to the hospital. Ever since he started needing care, he seemed to genuinely enjoy his trips to the hospital. He had been chatting more and more warmly with the nurse there. Every time I dropped him off at the hospital, I would go back home to do chores until the hospital called me to pick him up. That was the only time I could wash things like his caregiving bed linens. That day, about 4 hours after I had dropped him off, I got a call from Tom and went to pick him up. He seemed to be in a good mood, and he was even humming to himself. When we got home, I helped him into his caregiving bed. By then, that had become second nature to me. Normally, he wouldn't engage with me unless he needed something, but on that day, he stopped me and said,
I need to talk to you.
Curious, I tilted my head but decided to listen quietly. Then he said something outrageous.
Sorry, but I've started seeing a nurse 20 years younger than me, so I want a divorce. I don't want to spend any more time on someone who can't even handle caregiving properly. Oh, and by the way, this house is for me and her now, so pack your things and leave.
I froze, my eyes widening in shock. He started dating a nurse? Why? Even though I'm still here? Moreover, he wants me to leave the house so he can live with her? That's too cruel. I've worked so hard for him all the time. This is how it ends? At that moment, something dark and seething welled up inside me. That was anger. The sheer anger I felt toward Tom for his utterly outrageous behavior. At the same time, something inside me was cooling off. That was my love for him. I no longer cared about him at all. What I wanted then was to make that selfish man experience true hell. Once I made that decision, I didn't waste any time. I started preparing to drag Tom into the deepest pit of misery.
I really am sorry, but I want to live my life thinking only about her. My decision to divorce is final, so just accept it.
He said that, shoving the marital settlement agreement sheet at me. I recalled that there was a law office near the hospital. He must have picked up the papers in advance for that moment. Taking the papers from him, I grabbed a pen and signed them. His eyes widened in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected me to comply so easily. Smiling sweetly at him, I said,
Sure, here you go. I'll have all my stuff packed and be out by the end of the day. You and your girlfriend can enjoy a happy life together.
Tom probably never imagined that would all end so easily. He looked completely stunned by my reaction. Maybe he thought I'd beg him to stay. To me, he no longer mattered. Whether he ended up happy or miserable with his nurse girlfriend, that was no concern of mine. However, after being betrayed so horribly, I had no intention of letting him get away with that without consequences. At the very least, after all the years I spent taking care of him during his illness, I wasn't going to let him discard me so easily.
Are you really okay with this? If we divorce, you'll be all alone.
Tom asked, clearly shocked by how calm I was. Still smiling, I nodded.
Of course I'm okay. Actually, I feel relieved. It means I don't have to take care of you anymore. I can finally live my own life, and that's a refreshing thought.
I'd spent years in the exhausting routine of caregiving. Every day was thankless, no matter how hard I tried. However, that was all coming to an end. There was no reason to keep trying anymore. I felt as if I were being freed from hell. After letting Tom know, I retreated to my room and quickly packed my belongings to leave the house. I decided to take only the essentials with me. Once everything was packed, I grabbed my bag and walked out of the house. Tom watched me with an uneasy expression. My long, grueling life as his caregiver finally came to an end. Though, my plan for revenge was only just beginning. As I thought about the hell awaiting Tom, I couldn't help but feel lighter on my feet. I checked into a business hotel and started handling the necessary paperwork while also looking for a new home with a real estate agent. Within 3 days, I had completed the process and moved into a lovely new place. From then on, I enjoyed a leisurely and comfortable life. No more waking up early to cater to Tom's needs. Every moment was mine to enjoy. That new freedom filled me with joy. About a week after leaving the house, something happened. My phone began ringing incessantly. The sound was so loud and annoying that I checked that. That was a call from Tom. Realizing that things must have started unraveling on his end, I answered the phone.
Hello, Tom? What's the matter?
I said, feigning innocence. I wanted to hear directly from Tom about the situation he was in and just how desperate he had become. When I asked, he responded in a panicked tone.
Mary, please help me. I'm in big trouble. They told me to leave the house.
He began to explain hesitantly what had happened recently. After I left, he eagerly contacted his mistress, and the two of them started living together in the house the very next day. With me out of the way, they thought they could live a happy life together. However, a call soon came from the real estate agency. The message was simple. They needed to vacate the house immediately. Naturally, Tom and his mistress protested, but the agency remained firm. They were told that if they didn't leave within a week, the police would be involved.
They're saying the house has been put up for sale or something crazy like that. Please go talk to the real estate agency for me. They won't listen to anything I say. She's so anxious she hasn't even come back since yesterday.
No matter how much he pleaded that he didn't know anything about that, the real estate agency wouldn't budge. Then, he wanted me to step in and sort that out. That was his plea. From Tom's perspective, he probably felt like that was some random, unjust demand. In reality, everything was perfectly by the book.
Oh, you mean that? Don't worry, the real estate agency is just following the rules. They told you to leave within a week, right? If you don't, they really will call the police.
There was nothing illegal or improper about what the agency was doing. In fact, they were simply enforcing the terms of the contract. The real estate agency was simply acting in accordance with the contract. Everything that happened to Tom was all part of my plan.
What's going on?
He asked, tilting his head in confusion. I decided to explain everything to him from the beginning. First of all, Tom had been under a major misunderstanding. The house we had been living in wasn't his, but mine. I had paid for everything, including the construction costs, the land, and the mortgage. Not a single cent had come from Tom's paycheck. I had sacrificed things I wanted and lived frugally to make that work, even after he needed care. Yet, he had the audacity to cheat on me and throw me out of my own home. That was unacceptable. It didn't make sense for me to own the house but not live there. That's why I went to the real estate agency and started the process of selling the house.
That's the situation. If you and your mistress want to live in that house, you'll have to buy it yourselves. It's been there for a while, so you can probably get it for less than I paid.
It's absurd for a house already listed for sale to still have the previous occupants living in that. Therefore, for the sake of the real estate agency, they'd either have to buy the house or leave. However, Tom wasn't willing to accept my explanation.
What are you talking about? This house is mine. I'm the one living here. Why would I need to buy it? Just convince the agency to back off.
He whined and stomped his feet like a child. Apparently, he didn't want to leave or buy the house. I sighed, exasperated by his unreasonable attitude. He had always been stubborn once he made up his mind. There was a time when I admired his determination, but then it was just a nuisance. Though, this time, no matter how much he complained, that wouldn't change anything. A contract is a contract, and if he couldn't follow the rules, the police would inevitably get involved. I no longer felt the need to help him. After all, we were divorced. If we were still married, it might have been a different story.
Sorry, but no amount of whining will change anything. If you don't want to leave, that's your choice, but don't complain when the police show up.
I made that clear, leaving no room for argument. No matter how much he protested, I didn't budge. Finally, realizing he had no other options, Tom's demeanor changed.
Wait, seriously, but I can afford to buy the house. I don't have that kind of money saved anymore.
Judging by his tone, he truly didn't have the money to buy the house. That didn't make sense. He should have had some savings, enough to purchase the house at its reduced price compared to when it was built. Why was he acting so desperate? Before I even asked, Tom explained the reason himself. The day he kicked me out and moved his mistress into the house, she immediately asked to see his bank statement, saying she wanted to ensure their financial stability for the future. Since he intended to spend the rest of his life with her, he showed her his bank statement without hesitation. The moment she saw that, her demeanor changed. From then on, she started demanding money from him daily. In just one day, she managed to drain hundreds of thousands of dollars from his account. Even then, Tom convinced himself it was worth it to keep their relationship intact. However, the moment she heard about the real estate agency's demands, she stopped coming home. All he had left was a bank statement showing a depleted balance. His calls to her went unanswered, likely because she had blocked his number. He didn't even have enough money to sustain himself. He was completely cornered. In my view, the mistress never loved Tom to begin with. She was probably with him for his money. Tom had worked at a top-tier company, and he always bragged about that. He must have boasted about that to her too. While I did feel a twinge of pity for him, that didn't erase the fact that he betrayed me for her. Tom seemed to realize he had been used.
Please, Mary, I was wrong. I'll do anything, so just help me. You're the only one I can turn to now.
He was right. He had no one left but me. His mistress had abandoned him. If I chose to abandon him, he'd be evicted from the house and left with nowhere to go. That was the whole point of my revenge plan.
I'll do anything to win you back. I swear I'll change my ways. Let's live together again. I wasn't thinking straight back then.
Cheating is an unforgivable act. Sure, maybe he really wasn't in his right mind at the time. Though, that didn't change the fact that I had sacrificed so much for him over the years, only to be betrayed.
Please, give me another chance. I'll make up for everything I've done. I can't live without you. I just didn't realize that before. Please forgive this foolish man.
Tom's pleas sounded like something out of a tragic play. In the past, I might have fallen for that and gone back to him. Now, I can't care less about him. If anything, I hope he'd suffer even more. There was no way I could ever get back together with him feeling like that. Though, not that I had any intention of doing so.
Sorry, but you'll have to accept it. I've decided to live my own life now. I'm done with taking care of you. From now on, I'm living for myself. So, don't ever show up in front of me again. We're divorced, after all. Goodbye.
Wait, please don't abandon me.
Tom begged frantically on the other end of the line. If I hung up, he would likely spiral further into despair. That was no longer my concern. Ignoring his desperate cries, I ended the call and blocked his number. I also reached out to mutual friends and relatives, asking them not to respond if Tom tried to contact me. I felt a little guilty involving others, but it was necessary to cut all ties with him completely. Once I finished notifying everyone, I finally felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thus, the issues caused by Tom were finally resolved. At last, I could begin living my life for myself. However, even after everything, the problems that remained weren't simple to deal with. Tom went so far as to hire an attorney and demand alimony from me. It was ridiculous as he was the one who cheated, yet he was asking for money. Outraged, I hired my own attorney to fight back. As expected, Tom lost the case. Though, his audacity infuriated me so much that I decided to countersue and demand alimony from him instead. He cried and begged for forgiveness, but I didn't care. I had initially chosen not to seek alimony out of kindness, but he had the nerve to pick a fight with me. That was his own fault. In the end, Tom was evicted from the house. He also had no one to take care of him anymore and was living alone in a small apartment, scraping by day to day. Given his poor health, even basic daily tasks must be incredibly difficult for him. Well, that's not my problem. After the alimony lawsuit, he ended up in debt. As for me, I've been living a happy life, finally free from the burden of Tom. For the first time in years, I'm enjoying a stress-free life without the demands of caregiving. I've rediscovered how wonderful it is to have the time and energy to spend entirely on myself. Although the ordeal with Tom was stressful, that also gave me the opportunity to let go of things I no longer needed in my life. Now, I even feel grateful to his mistress. I had spent so many years sacrificing for him. Yet, those days are over. From now on, I'll live for myself.